everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today I'm going to film a video that I have never filmed before, and that is the try a chapter tag. I'm at that point where I need to pick up another book, but I just really don't know what I'm in the mood for reading, so I have grabbed 5 books that are sitting on my TBR shelf, and I am going to try the first chapter in each of the books, and then based on how much I like each chapter, I'm going to pick which book to continue reading. The first book that I'm going to be giving a try is The Sunrise by Victoria Hislop. It's about Greek and Turkish Cypriots in the 1970s. Les actually gave me this book a couple of years ago for Christmas, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I've been feeling in the mood for it lately. The second book I want to try is Rainbow Rowell's Attachments. This is about a young man that works at a company, and he reads through company emails to make sure people aren't talking about things they're not supposed to be talking about, but he gets really wrapped up in the lives of these 2 women because of the emails that he's reading. I picked this up earlier this summer at a library book sale, and I did have it on my TBR for one of the readathons that happened earlier this summer as well, but I just didn't get around to it. The third book that I want to try is Honor by Illipe Shafak. I picked this up in the bargain section at Barnes & Noble a couple months ago. This one is about sisters. One of the sisters moves to London and her husband doesn't really like their new life, so he leaves her, and she begins hanging out with another man, and the woman's oldest son, who has now sort of become the head of the household, is not too happy about that. The fourth book is a new release, and that is Sarah Dessen's Once and For All. This was a book that I requested from Penguin after I read her other most recent book, Saint Anything, and was really impressed with it. I wanted to ask for her next book to give it a try. This one is about a young woman named Luna who's working for her mother's wedding planning business. So she's a little bit jaded about the whole process, but then she meets a guy and things happen. Who would have thought? And then lastly, I have one nonfiction book that I've been looking to read, and that is First Women, The Grace and Power of America's Modern First Ladies by Kate Anderson Brower. This is actually a book that my grandma had, and when I went to visit her, she saw me flipping through it, and she said, oh yeah, go ahead and borrow it and give it a read. This is about 10 of America's more modern first ladies, so think like Jackie Kennedy, Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton in the more recent years, and sort of what it takes to be a first lady. So in order of how they were introduced, I am going to begin by reading the first chapter of The Sunrise, and I will be back in just a moment to let you know what I think. Okay, so I just finished the first chapter in The Sunrise, and it was very much just setting everything up and introducing the rather large cast of characters that there's going to be. This is a historical fiction book, so it is about true events that occurred in 1972 in Cyprus, and it actually has like a little timeline to give you an idea of what has led up to the events so far. And a lot of time was spent describing the very fancy hotel that's just about to open called The Sunrise, and the people that work there and their families, and the writing was alright. I wasn't particularly impressed with it, and because nothing really happened, it wasn't that exciting. So I'm feeling so-so about this one. I have a feeling I might like some other ones better. So I am going to try reading the first chapter of Attachments now. So I read the first few chapters in Attachments because they were super short, like a page and a half, so I read the first 3, and it alternates between the 2 female characters and their emails back and forth to each other, and then regularly written chapters about Lincoln, who's the guy who is reading over the emails at this business to make sure people aren't talking about things they shouldn't talk about. The emails that the girls are sending back and forth to each other, Beth and Jennifer, I don't know, I'm kind of not into it. They were kind of making jokes about fetal alcohol syndrome in the first bit, and maybe if that was farther into the book and I understood the characters more, that wouldn't make me as uncomfortable as it made me reading it in the very first chapter. But I don't know. Lincoln's chapters are okay so far, though. Once again, kind of not thrilled by this one either, so I think I can kind of confidently set that one aside and hope that the next one is better. That next one is going to be Honor, and this will be very different vibe from the other book that I just read, so we'll see. Thank God. Third time was the charm in this case for sure. The first chapter of this book, though short, was well written and very intriguing. We're introduced to Esma, and she's a writer, so it seems like this book is supposed to be sort of written by her, telling the story of her mother, and we get introduced to her brother, the murderer, in the very first chapter, so I certainly wouldn't call that a spoiler, but I'm definitely intrigued. So this one is going in the I think I might want to read this one pile. I'm now going to pick up Once and For All. This will be another interesting transition from very dark to sort of more lighter YA. Finished the first chapter of Once and For All. I have to say I really like Sarah Dessen's writing style. I haven't read a lot of her books, and before Say Anything, the last book I read was like almost 10 years ago. I don't know, I read the first chapter, I liked the flow of the writing, I liked what was being talked about, it was a really good sort of introductory setup chapter. Overall, I really liked it. And in that case, it's going to go in the potentially read pile. Now for the last book, First Women. Definitely different than all the other books I have on this list, so I will give it a try and let you know. Final book, First Women. I just read the shorter introduction because the actual chapter was like 40 pages and I wasn't really ready to commit to that much of the book. I really liked the introduction. It said some really wonderful things about the First Ladies, how they were ordinary people living extraordinary lives. They were part of this exclusive sorority. I feel like the author is going to have a lot of really interesting things to say, so I'm certainly interested in reading this book as well. Of the three that I liked, I'm going to go with Honor just because I need to read a book that's a little bit different from what I've read before. This book I can probably read for Nonfiction November because it's pretty much only a month away at this point. And with the Sarah Dessen book, I read Say Anything fairly recently, and I know I could kind of whip through this book really quickly if I wanted to. I feel like Honor is the right choice in this case with the very intriguing first chapter. I had a good time filming this. It was fun to try a different sort of video, and I think this is something I will definitely do in the future. Maybe try like a themed one where it's a particular type of book, something like that. If you have thoughts on any of these books, feel free to share them in the comments down below. As always, all of our links are in the doobly-doo. Check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.